I'm quite surprised actually that reputational risk would have come in second. I remember many years ago now when I was in the Navy, we had this crusty old Master Chief who told us, if you only remember one thing I say, remember that one awe will outdo 1,000 attaboys. And that's true in business. And so we're still talking about Dan Rather walking off the set, 20 years later. And you think about things that have happened in history, in business, and you go, wow, that was 15 years ago. I was just talking to Brian Zawada recently, that was 7 years ago that this thing happened. We're remembering the impact of that reputation hit way after the continuity of operations was already solved. And so I think it's by far the number one risk, and that's important because it's not easily quantified. We've been trying for a decade to figure out how do you quantify reputation risk, and it's just extremely difficult to do it. So they have long tails, you can't quantify them, almost impossible to insure, right? So you can't do anything with the risk transfer of that, so you have to manage it well. And I think social media is a key aspect of that. Brian was telling me about his school. There was a bomb threat at one of his kids' schools, and the way most of the parents found out about it was their kids' Twitter accounts. They're tweeting about it. The speed of information flow through social media vehicles is crazy.
Years ago, it was financial risk or financial impact was the major driver. Today, it's reputational. And the reason is that the sheer speed in which bad news can be communicated across an entire spectrum of stakeholders interested in your organizations. So I kind of see reputational as being number one. Now, what does that mean for our profession? Well, first of all, I think, and again, talking to people at the conference, people are more worried about non-traditional threats today. Data breaches, product quality issues that can have a direct impact on the organization's viability and longevity. And so, as business continuity professionals, we have to be really, really good at enabling our organizations to communicate with various stakeholder communities quickly, be very transparent, get the relevant information out. And social media can be a contributor to that. Social media can help provide updates, alerts, even indicator, kind of a preliminary look at information that might be coming out and saying, hey, stay tuned. We're on this. We're taking a look at it. We're taking it very seriously. And that's an important attribute of how social media can help us as business continuity professionals.
Sure, and organizations work really, really hard, Luke, to establish their brand image, and all it takes is just one event to really tarnish that image. And we can look back at a number of case studies. For instance, United Airlines one time famously lost somebody's guitar. This person happened to be a musician who had access to the internet, made a very famous YouTube video that got millions and millions of hits. And in fact, it actually had a negative effect on United's stock price over time. So you can see that reputation can be besmirched by a minor incident or an ignored incident. So I think that as I work in programs, I look at reputational risk as you said, as a major driver, and it can't be ignored. So organizations must be aware and must be cognizant of that. Put programs in place. Social media has so much power that it really can take the wind out of an organization's sails. So I would suggest that a social media incident response plan, somebody managing your brand through social media through the use of commercial tools that are available, and getting ahead of any event will surely do you good.
In many industries, when you ask about reputational risk, when you think about an outage or a disaster, most of the time it comes down to reputation. Because if I'm a manufacturer, I need to manufacture products probably to sell them. If I'm a retailer, I need to be able to get those products to put them on a store to get them to the end user. If I'm a financial services company, I need to be able to handle those financial services and those people's money. So in many cases, most of the incidents that we have are based on reputational risk. These days with social media, things happen so fast. And a perfect example is looking at the Continental and United merger. I mean, I don't know how many people have gone out and looked at Facebook, but oh my gosh, there's the reputation. Things happen so fast. So your employees are going to be looking at things like that. Your people around the street, even if they're not employees, they're going to be going to Facebook, social media, Twitter. It's really important that public relations areas, corporate affairs type areas, really have the right kind of people monitoring that and focused on it so that they can react accordingly. Many organizations that I've talked to recently have that issue, and a lot of times it takes hours to get media messages out there. In this day and age, you don't have hours.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, Luke, that it's number 2, to be honest. I think reputational risk should be actually top of the list. It really is probably one of the key drivers for most firms and should stay a driver for a firm long term. As far as a risk is concerned with respect to reputational risk, I think the issue is related to what that firm can do in a crisis, how that firm will operate in a crisis, and how that firm will put itself back in a crisis. The difference between normal operations in a crisis-based scenario is that you get a feel for what the management team is all about, what the internals of the organization are like, and how well they can respond given the situation they're posed with. If they respond well there, you've got a stronger level of assurance that from a resilience vantage point, they'll respond well to other things downstream. The irony is, while an operation moves and operates well, with no crisis, in no situation at hand, you don't get a feel for how solid that management team is in terms of perspective in dealing with a crisis. So when you see the crisis and you see the response to the crisis, you get a glean for A, how well they did due to the crisis, and B, how well they'll do with things like that in the future. It's a much better perspective. It's like an operation that performs better in the service environment than in the normal delivery environment. When the service channel breaks down and they're responsive, you now know how responsive they can be. And under normal operations, you don't get that vision. You can't see it through that lens until you have the crisis at hand.
Coming from the media business, for us, being very obvious and out there and visible to gazillions of people all the time, reputation practically equals ratings that in turn equal revenue. And as the same study I think you're referring to found, reputation can be ruined within minutes and then could not be restored for, I think the results said, 5 to 7 years on average. And that speaks volumes to, that comes down to money, money. And that's a huge reason for our programs to exist and a huge motivator to succeed. As far as social media, I think social media needs to be managed specifically in terms of, just like it is for brand development and strategic reasons. It's only successful when it's managed specifically, not as part of some other program, and same here. Effective ways to integrate and pull it all together, I think, is to consistently work with and collaborate with the executive team and public relations or corporate communications team. That, I think, answers both parts as far as the reputational risk and the social media. These two are key.
Well, it's interesting. I've been doing a lot of work with some retail organizations, and I would say two of the big things that they're concerned about are quality and safety. From a manufacturing point of view, especially in the consumer goods area, buyers are concerned about the quality of products, the safety of products, and if there are issues, related to continuity, and the word gets out that, company A has had a disaster and maybe a manufacturing facility has been impacted by that. Consumers are going to pick up on that and say, gee, I wonder if their products are okay. We haven't heard about a recall. So I think the more that the business continuity program can do to sort of insulate some of those issues, make sure the proper messaging is getting out, and make sure that there are no concerns. Make sure that there's a increased attention during a crisis to the social media issues. So having teams that monitor Facebook, monitor Twitter, things like that, get the message out ahead of time and let people know that, yes, we had an issue, but it's under control, we're dealing with it, the products are safe, things like that, I think can do a lot, Luke, to dispel any reputational issues. And again, I think for a lot of companies, quality and safety are two really big points.